I died kneeling, not with dignity, not with grace, not with the quiet acceptance that poets write about or the heroic defiance that songs are sung for. I died on cold stone, my knees pressed against floors that had been polished by servants who would forget my name within a week. The chills seeped through my robes, through my skin, into the very marrow of my bones, and I remember thinking, strangely, distantly, that this was not how I had imagined my end. Around me stood people who refused to meet my eyes. Courtiers who had bowed to me that morning now studied their own shoes. Officials who had sought my favor now stared at walls, at ceilings, anywhere but at the woman being stripped of everything. Their silence was louder than any accusation. Their averted gazes cut deeper than any blade. "Your Majesty, my son is the rightful heir." My voice echoed in the great hall, steadier than I felt. It bounced off the high ceilings, off the golden pillars, off the faces of people who had once called themselves my allies. I had practiced those words 1,000 times in my head, rehearsed every possible response, prepared for every outcome except this one. The outcome where he simply refused to listen. The Emperor didn't even look at me. He sat on his throne, elevated above everyone else, his robes pooling around him like dark water. His face was carved from the same stone as the palace walls, impassive, immovable, utterly indifferent to the life he was dismantling piece by piece. "The heir," he said flatly, his voice carrying the weight of finality, "will be Consort Lien's son." A murmur spread through the court. Not surprised. Not outraged. Just the quiet rustle of people adjusting to new information, recalculating their loyalties, deciding where to stand now that the ground had shifted beneath them. My hands tightened inside my sleeves. My nails pressed crescents into my palms. "He is younger," I pressed, my voice rising despite myself. "My son was born first. By law, by tradition, by every precedent this court has ever followed." And he cut in, finally turning his gaze toward me. Those eyes. I had once loved those eyes. I had once seen warmth in them. Or perhaps I had imagined it, projected my own feelings onto a man who was incapable of returning them. Now they were just cold, impatient, the eyes of someone who had already moved on and resented being reminded of what he was leaving behind. "As Empress," he continued, his tone clipped, "you should understand your place." A quiet laugh came from behind him. Consort Lien. She stood in the shadows near the throne, half hidden by a silk screen, but I could see her clearly. The curve of her smile, the tilt of her chin, the way she stood like she already owned everything. The hall, the court, the Emperor, my son's birthright, my life. My chest burned. "Your place?" I repeated, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Or hers?" The room froze. I had said it. The thing everyone thought but no one spoke. The truth that hung in every room of the palace, unacknowledged but undeniable. She had been here for years. Protected. Preferred. The Emperor's expression darkened like a storm rolling across a clear sky. "Careful," he warned. I stepped forward despite the guards shifting around me, despite my aunt's hand reaching for my sleeve, despite every instinct that told me to stop. But I had been careful for years. I had measured every word, calculated every gesture, swallowed every protest. And where had it got me? On my knees. On cold stone. Watching my son's future be given to someone else. "No," I said, my voice sharper now, cutting through the heavy air. "You hid her for years. Gave her a child in secret. Let her live in luxury while I ran your court, managed your officials, bore your heir. And now you want to erase him like he never existed? Like the past decade meant nothing." Enough. The single word slammed into the hall like a physical force. Not loud, not shouted, but absolute. The kind of command that expected no response except obedience. Silence. Heavy. Final. "You've said enough," he continued, colder than before, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "Take her away." I stared at him, waiting, just waiting, for him to hesitate, for some flicker of doubt to cross his face, For the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, for him to remember any of it. Any moment, any promise, any whispered word in the dark when he had told me I was irreplaceable. He didn't. Not even for a second. His gaze was already moving past me, already settling on Consort Lien, already erasing me from his attention like ink wiped from a page. As they forced me down, as my knees hit the stone for the final time, my son's voice rang out from somewhere behind me. Mother. That was the last thing I heard. I opened my eyes to music.
Soft, bright, alive.
The kind of music that belonged to celebrations, to beginnings, to moments before everything went wrong. The Imperial Banquet. My breath caught in my throat like a physical object. I knew this room. I knew these lights. I knew the way the silk curtains caught the breeze from the garden, the way the golden lanterns cast warm shadows on familiar faces, the way the air smelled of incense and wine and the particular perfume that the Empress Dowager favored. And I knew the tray. The same silk-lined tray. The same ivory slips, each one bearing the name of a noble daughter, each one representing a future, a possibility, a cage. The beginning of everything. My fingers trembled slightly inside my sleeves. My heart pounded against my ribs like a caged bird. Around me, the other young women giggled and whispered and adjusted their hairpins, oblivious to the weight of the moment, to the fact that someone among them had already lived this night and died because of it. Take one, my aunt whispered eagerly, her hand pressing against my back, her voice thick with ambition she didn't bother to hide. I looked at the tray, then at the throne. He was there, younger than I remembered, softer around the edges. His face was calm, detached, the face of a man performing a duty rather than making a choice. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at anyone. His gaze drifted somewhere above the crowd, somewhere distant, somewhere that didn't require engagement. Just like before. In my last life, I had reached out. I had taken a slip. I had walked forward with my head held high, believing that I could be different, that I could matter, that I could earn a love that should have been given freely. That had been my mistake. This time, I won't. The words slipped out before anyone could stop me, quiet but absolute, spoken more to myself than to anyone else. The girl beside me gasped. What? I pass. The tray bearer froze. The music continued, but the space around us seemed to go still, as if the world itself was pausing to process what I had said. My aunt grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve hard enough to bruise. Have you lost your mind? I pulled away slowly, deliberately, freeing myself from her grip. I don't want this. Don't want. She nearly shouted, her voice rising above the music, drawing glances from nearby guests. That is the Emperor, the ruler of the Empire. Every family here would kill for this chance. Yes, I said quietly, meeting her eyes for the first time. And that is exactly why. The palace was already restless when I left. I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the golden gates. Not at the guards who watched me go with confusion in their eyes. Not at the towers where I had spent a decade of my previous life walking corridors that all looked the same. I walked away with the same deliberate calm I had once used to survive the court, and I did not allow myself to wonder what might have been. Days passed. Then weeks. My family argued, pressured, threatened. My father's face turned red with fury. My mother wept into her sleeves. My aunt refused to speak to me for 3 days, then spoke only to tell me I had ruined us all. You're throwing away your future, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table so hard the teacups rattled. I already lived that future, I replied. He stared at me like I had gone mad. Perhaps I had. Perhaps madness was the only reasonable response to living the same life twice and expecting different results. But this time, I chose something different. When I agreed to marry a man outside the court, a minor official from a minor family, a man with no political ambitions and no desire to climb, even the servants whispered, "He's just a minor official. He's not even from the capital." His mother was a merchant's daughter, I heard. Why would she choose that? After she could have had the emperor? Because he didn't look at me like I was a position to be filled. Because when he spoke, his words weren't calculated, weren't weighed for political advantage, weren't chosen for their ability to manipulate. Because he was kind in the way that people are kind when they have nothing to gain from it. "Are you sure?" he asked me, almost awkwardly, when the arrangements were being made. He stood in my family's garden, uncomfortable in his formal robes, looking at me like I was something precious and fragile and entirely too good for him. "You can still change your mind. I wouldn't blame you." "I know I'm not. I know this isn't what you were meant for." I shook my head. "I won't." He studied me for a moment, searching my face for something. Doubt, perhaps, or regret. Finding neither, he nodded slowly.
All right.
"Then I'll do my best." Simple.
Direct.
No hidden meaning. No promises he couldn't keep.
Just a quiet commitment to try.
It felt strangely safe. Inside the palace, things did not stay peaceful. At first, the emperor indulged her. Consort Lien, elevated now to the position that should have been mine, laughed freely and spoke without restraint, and even argued with him in private. Things I had never dared to do, things I had been trained from birth to avoid. "You said I wouldn't be trapped like the others," she snapped one night, her voice carrying through the thin walls of the palace, overheard by servants who would later repeat it to other servants who would later repeat it to the entire city. "I gave you everything," he replied coldly. "I didn't want everything. I wanted you. You have me." She laughed bitterly, a sound that held no joy.
No.
"I have your throne. I have your court. I have your officials and your ceremonies and your endless, exhausting performance of power. But I don't have you. I never did." Days turned into tension, then into distance. She grew restless, chafing against rules she didn't understand, traditions she didn't respect, expectations she refused to meet. He grew colder, withdrawing into the same detachment I had once mistaken for dignity. Servants whispered more each day, their voices carrying the particular glee of people watching their betters fail. "She's not suited to be Empress. She doesn't understand the court. She spends too much. The treasury can't sustain her whims. She argues with ministers, publicly, in front of everyone. He's going to tire of her soon. They always do." One night, a porcelain cup shattered across the floor of the imperial chambers. "I hate this place," she shouted. "I hate these walls and these rules, and these people who watch everything I do. I hate being looked at like I'm never enough." The emperor stood there, silent, watching. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Not the cold dismissal I had expected. Something worse. Realization. It didn't come all at once.
Just small things, at first.
A mistake in court that should have been caught. A diplomatic misstep that turned into an incident. A festival that fell apart because no one had coordinated the details. A conflict between officials that escalated because there was no one to mediate. He began to notice the gaps, the silences, the things that had once run smoothly, now grinding to awkward halts. How different it had been before. How smooth everything had once run. How someone had quietly handled everything, every conflict, every crisis, every petty dispute and major negotiation, without asking for recognition, without complaining, without ever standing out. How that someone had simply been there, always, reliably, invisibly. And for the first time he remembered, not just vaguely, not just fragments, but everything. The banquet, the tray of ivory slips, the woman who had stepped forward and taken one, the woman who had become Empress, the woman who had stood beside him for years, managing his court, bearing his heir, doing everything he asked and never once demanding anything in return. The woman who had died on cold stone while he watched, because he had chosen someone else. His hand tightened around the armrest of his throne. "So that's what I lost," he said aloud, to no one in particular. "When he found me, I was outside the city. The house was small but comfortable. A garden with vegetables instead of ornamental flowers. A courtyard where chickens scratched at the dirt. A life that was mine in a way the palace had never been. He arrived with only a small retinue, no fanfare, no announcement, no imperial procession. Just a man on a horse, wearing traveling clothes instead of robes, looking older than I remember despite the years that had passed. He stopped a few steps away from the garden gate. Like he wasn't sure if he should come closer. Like he was afraid of what he might find if he did. "You really left," he said. I set down the basket of vegetables I had been carrying. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the dirt path. "And you really came?" His jaw tightened slightly, the way it used to when he was holding something back. "You remember." It wasn't a question. He could see it in my face, in my eyes, in the way I looked at him without the deference he was accustomed to. "Yes." Silence stretched between us. The kind of silence that holds everything unsaid, everything that can't be taken back, everything that time and distance have made irretrievable. Then he stepped closer. "You should be in the palace," he said. I let out a small breath. Not quite a sigh. Not quite a laugh. Something in between. "There it is." His brows drew together. "What?" "That tone," I said. "Like I belong to you. Like my place is wherever you decide it should be." His voice hardened, the imperial mask sliding back into place. "You were meant to be my Empress. And you were meant to treat her like one." That landed. I saw it in the way his expression flickered, in the way his hands clenched at his sides. "You think you would have been different?" he asked. "You think you wouldn't have made mistakes? Grown restless? Wanted more than I could give?" I stepped forward now, closing the distance between us. "No," I said. "I know exactly how it ends." His eyes narrowed. "Then say it."
So I did.
"You choose her." The words cut clean between us, sharp as a blade, final as a death sentence. "You hide her. You give her a child in secret. You let her drain the treasury and alienate your officials and make mistake after mistake, and you defend her every time. And when it comes time to choose, when the court demands you choose, when your son's future hangs in the balance, you throw everything away. For her." His breathing shifted.
Barely.
Almost imperceptibly. "But she wasn't what you thought, was she?" I added. "She wasn't the solution. She wasn't the answer. She was just different. And different is not the same as better." Silence. Heavy.
Sharp.
I let out a quiet laugh, more bitter than amused. "Let me guess. She doesn't like the rules. Doesn't respect the court. Doesn't play the game the way you need someone to play it. She fights back when you expect her to submit, and she submits when you wish she would fight. And you can't predict her, and that excites you, but it also exhausts you, and you're starting to wonder if you made a mistake." His voice dropped. "You sound like you've seen it." "I lived it." That shut him up. For real. He looked at me like he was seeing something he had never understood before, something he had overlooked, dismissed, taken for granted until it was gone. "Come back," he said. I blinked once, then smiled. Not softly, not kindly, not with any of the warmth I had once offered him freely. "You still don't get it." His expression hardened again. "You think this is a request?" I stepped even closer. Close enough that my voice didn't need to rise above a whisper. "Try it." The air shifted. His guards tensed behind him, hands moving toward weapons, ready to protect their emperor from the threat of a woman in a garden apron holding a basket of vegetables. But he didn't move. Because something in my eyes wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm not that woman," I said quietly. "The one who stood there waiting for you to choose her. The one who died on cold stone hoping you would change your mind. That woman is gone. She died. And I am not her." His jaw clenched. "And you think you're better off like this?" he asked, gesturing at the small house, the modest garden, the life I had built with my own hands. I glanced back briefly, toward the path that led home, toward the warm light in the window, toward the man who was probably inside, preparing dinner, not knowing that the emperor of the empire was standing in his garden. Yes. No hesitation. That answer hit harder than anything else I had said, because it was true, because I meant it, because there was nothing in my voice that invited argument or negotiation or compromise. He didn't follow me when I turned.
Didn't stop me.
Didn't order anything. And that, perhaps, said more than any words could have. That night, my husband noticed I was quieter than usual. "Trouble?" he asked, setting down a bowl of soup in front of me. I shook my head. "Just the past." He nodded once. He didn't ask for details. He never did. He trusted me to share what I wanted to share and keep what I needed to keep. "Did it win?" he asked. I looked at him, at his kind eyes, at his patient face, at the man who had never asked me to be anything other than what I was. Then I smiled. Faintly. Honestly.
No.
He hummed lightly, satisfied with that answer, and picked up his own bowl. Good. And that was it. No questions. No pressure. No hidden calculations or political maneuvering. Just dinner. Just us. Just the quiet peace of a life built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Days later, the Emperor left the city. Before he did, he sent one final message. Not an order. Not a command. Not an imperial decree bearing the weight of law. Just a single line, written in his own hand. I was too late. I read it once, then folded it away. Because for the first time in either of my lives, being late meant nothing to me. I had already found what I was looking for. And it had never been in the palace. It had never been on that throne. It had never been in the hands of a man who only valued me when I was gone. It was here. In this small house. In this quiet garden. In the patient love of someone who had never asked me to be anyone but myself. And that, I finally understood, was worth more than any empire.